Hey, I'm Marcus Burton.
Hey, GT Hill.
Hey, I'm wearing purple. This is my version of marketing.
Awesome. I'm wearing black, just like always.
It's very
So
dark.
it's good for me.
Hey, we haven't titled our videos in the past. We're going to call this one The Evolution of an Icon.
What icon?
The cloud, of course, and
The
lightning bolts.
cloud. The cloud icon. Yeah, it's important to know the history of the cloud. And for us, I would maybe even include I don't know if I include you, Marcus, but for us old school people, it wasn't always called the cloud. We actually just used the icon. In fact, if you look at, if I'm drawing a building here and, any connections outside of that building were done with a lightning bolt and a cloud icon, which I can't draw very well. But but that is not it was never called cloud. We didn't actually write cloud in there. That always designated the internet, something outside of our connection.
Yeah, I love the lightning bolt there. We should start using that again just to refer to our internet connectivity and be like, I'm going to upgrade my lightning bolt from 50 megs to 100 megs.
Yeah, a lot of people out there are like, man, I already had 100 megs. I'm slow out here in
I know
old school.
I'm in the country.
Right. So we kind of start when you think about the cloud today. A lot of times we talk about remote data. We've already talked about that in other videos. But where did that come from? Well, it started with the local data centers. So down here at this bottom, we would put the IT people and their equipment, their servers, in the basement. So that was kind of, I don't know what we would call that. Like, is that kind of like that's like step one, or the kind of the evolution was number one, right? We'd put all the equipment, all the hardware was stuck in the bottom.
Right. Going back many decades in the
Right. I
past.
mean, it still happens today, right? We'll talk
Right,
about
right.
that. This does come full circle, which is kind of
Right.
interesting. So then number two was, driven from, we'll do another color here, driven from the idea that we need to have data stored offsite. Maybe that's for security, maybe that's for, redundancy, whatever it may be. Let's store that data offsite. So this would just be, we would just call this maybe an offsite data center. And it would be, indicated with a cloud icon. It would just say, hey, any connectivity to our offsite cloud data center is done in that way. But then number three came along, which is companies said, hey, look, instead of you having your own data center, why don't we provide that for you? So then it would be maybe like a contracted or a hosted data center. So again, still located off to the internet, but where someone is paying a company to do this. Now, this is really early version infrastructure as a service. We've talked about that in other videos. So we're really driving to how is this now cloud? Well, there actually became a problem that happened. Imagine you are a company that is expanding very, very fast, maybe in the 90s, early 2000s. You're expanding fast. You're really running into a problem of software and hardware being coupled together. Many of you have seen this before, where it's like, okay, this software on this hardware will give you 1,000x sessions, processes, whatever it may be. There's some number tied to that combination. But there's this company out there that started running this problem because they were growing by 10x, 15x, and then during the really busy season, during the holidays, November and December, they were running into exponential growth where they almost couldn't even rely on their own IT team to do this, even whether it's a number one, a number two, or number three. They couldn't really do that. Now we are talking about the evolution of this icon.
Yeah, and this, I would say, even too, like these steps are not even the cloud yet. This is just the way, whether we insource or outsource our data center, and the relationship between our software and hardware. And so that problem you describe is, maybe y'all have figured it out by now that he's talking about Amazon. And the problem is, you hit new points of scale where you've got to increase hardware, and then you find software efficiencies where you might even want to be able to decrease hardware. You hit seasonal load, and you've got this super dynamic application from a software perspective, but the hardware can't adjust and fluctuate as quickly. So Amazon basically saw an opportunity to solve their own problem. And as they did that, they basically realized, look, IT teams, across the world are suffering from the same issue, which is that the hardware and software are too tightly coupled together, and the dynamics of hardware and software move at different paces and in different ways. And so we need a way. So they basically said, hey, let's tease them apart. Let's couple them more loosely. And then let's just build this infrastructure as something that can be consumed. And if we have an operator that provides enough infrastructure, they can then offer that infrastructure as a public service that's then consumable by sort of the public at large, and be able to meet all of those dynamic requirements across seasons and software changes.
Right, and that's the key. Is it's not just a number three where Amazon said let's outsource hardware and call it the cloud. Is there's, like Marcus said, there's services that came with that, right? The ability to do early databases, early data, those kind of things that we take for granted almost today in cloud development. That was the services portion of what they were starting, which is, if you remember back to other videos, which became the platforms as a service. That's really kind of where this discussion started happening, is right in here.
Yeah, and they did eventually pick up sort of platforms as a service, but even for the longest time at the beginning, it was just infrastructure as a service. But in this model, it was, what's probably the least controversial cloud term, which is public cloud, meaning it's just available to everyone sort of, for use. And there's also hybrid cloud and private cloud, and then even if you want to call it local cloud. So it's not just public cloud, but there's these other options, which is where it becomes a little bit more controversial.
Yeah, I do actually mean to interrupt you this time, Marcus, because you're talking politics and religion here, man. Because we can't really say what is public is pretty easy. I agree, but we could get in trouble by somebody out there, the cloud police, for making doctrine as to which is which. But we are going to talk about every one of them. So we talk about public, right? I think that's pretty straightforward. What's the next one? What's the easiest one to talk about next?
So private cloud is probably the most controversial, not necessarily easiest to talk about, but I think we need to work that one out first before we go to hybrid. So private cloud really has sort of 3 or 4 variations from a term perspective. So when people say private, what they mean are sort of 3 or 4 different things. The first one is really if I'm an organization and I have a public cloud account, let's say with Amazon or Google or Microsoft or whoever, and I log into my account and I want to run some services just for my own organization, sometimes people will use that sort of concept and call that private cloud. The second one is where they say, look, the public cloud is great, but we are security sensitive and we don't necessarily want to run our workloads in the public cloud. We want a dedicated private cloud. And so, either on a macro scale, very, very large data centers like for the U.S. government, or on a really small scale, which is just like a specific software as a service that's dedicated to an organization, this sort of dedicated private resourcing is the second version of private cloud. And then the third model is really just picking up that private cloud idea, that second model, and packaging up that software in a way that can be handed to a customer to operate in their own data center. So this is where it goes back to the customer's data center, but it's a packaging of that sort of public-private, hosted cloud solution into something that they can run locally.
So that is run locally. So this is run locally.
Right.
We'll call this number 3. Now these are not generations of cloud or anything like that. But these are, so that's run locally. Is that still a cloud?
Yeah, it becomes interesting. I could get on my pulpit and preach a sermon on what I feel about this, but I think there'd be a lot of disagreement. But it really is what causes this fourth potential private cloud, which we also call local cloud, which is basically just customers operating their own data center. And sometimes the architecture of that data center evolves, but so local cloud is kind of what fits in here. So you could call it private cloud if you want, or it could be something different.
Right. I already drew that over here. Right.
Yeah.
I drew number 1 where we have the IT people in the
right
in the basement. So now we're calling that cloud.
Well, it's a little bit of a marketing, it's oftentimes influenced by marketing, is that it sounds much cooler to call that cloud than just to call it a data center, and it sounds more evolved. And actually the third model, hybrid, so we talked about public and private, hybrid computing kind of falls victim to that same marketing issue. So hybrid computing is basically some combination of public and private cloud computing. But oftentimes what happens is basically people say, hey, we have been using our own private data center for a while, and now we've started migrating to a public cloud service, so we're hybrid now, right? Like it's kind of like we're migrating, and so they want to call that private, or they want to call that hybrid. It's a little bit of a marketing
I'm kind of
thing.
proud of my fellow IT people for being marketing people. Saying, oh, we do have the cloud, where they would have never said that 15 years ago. Now, since it kind of went full circle, if you will, if I were to draw out back to number 4 here, which again, 4 being higher than 3 sounds like it's better. Obviously, that isn't what we're doing here. But now we're back to, number 3-ish, 4 is just back in our data center, right?
Yeah.
Even if the data center was outside of our building, across a lightning bolt in this cloud space,
Right.
maybe that could be called cloud. But when we come back to number 4 and it's housed by, you got a bunch of servers racked in the basement, that's I feel like we're stretching here a little bit.
Well, and what becomes more interesting about the hybrid cloud is actually that you can start to build systems that leverage the best of both worlds. And so, taking advantage of sort of this whole portfolio of public and private, in all of its different variations. And hybrid is basically saying, let's build an app that takes advantage of public and private at the same time and splits workloads across those two places.
Okay, so I'm going to use Extreme Networks as a summary here, because we have, I'm going to go pull this paper out. So Extreme Networks has a public cloud, like do many people, but many organizations. But one of the things that's unique here is there are multiple public clouds. We talk about Amazon, but the other 2 big providers out there are now Google and Azure, Microsoft Azure. So why would you pick one cloud over the other? One of the reasons is, for us, we have customers. We have large retail customers. If you're a retailer, would you want Amazon as your cloud provider? No, you're not going to want that. And even some retailer customers that we have view Google as a competitor. So one of the interesting things is that, touting Extreme for great things here, is that we have all 3 cloud providers. Our cloud is built in all 3 of these. But then there are multiple versions also here, which are, what if you have a company that wants a number 2 here, which is, or a number 1, I want a private instance in a cloud, or a number 2, which is give me my own space. We have all of this, even this number 3 into a 4, right? We can package this up and send it to them, right? Am I heading down the right track, Marcus?
Yeah, and what's really awesome about that, I really am wearing purple. I'm gonna do a little more marketing. But what's awesome about that for real though, and this is across just Extreme, but for other companies as well, is like everyone evaluates cloud options and looks at the benefits of each one. So from public cloud, you might get benefits of pure OpEx model, easier to use, less worry, less overhead. You just build on someone else's stuff. With a private cloud, you say, I want more control, I want more security, I want even to run on my own infrastructure sometimes, which might have a better sort of long-term total cost of ownership cost model. And then, the hybrid option might be like, let's just blend, let's blend a solution to try to maximize the best of both worlds, or even to have a foot in both worlds so that if we need to pivot down the road, we can. And so even in the hybrid model, you're basically trying to leverage some of the best of public and private clouds to meet your own business requirements.
Okay. So let's take another extreme example, or a networking company's example. Mm-hmm. Are we ever truly a public cloud, or 100% cloud? And
Right.
I'm not making, I've learned to not make any guesses or assertions on this video because religion and stuff. But, this company, which I'm still using this really nice symbol of a building here, this company has networking equipment in it. It's got extreme switches and access points and all this coolness that's going on.
Yeah.
It's managed in a cloud, 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's managed there.
Yeah.
But some of the data is happening, all the data is happening inside. Mm-hmm. And for the cool stuff that your team works on, Marcus, machine learning, AI, those things need data.
Right.
So the networking equipment is providing that data So what is that, a hybrid, or what is that?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think we cross a boundary in that conversation where we're no longer talking about sort of the cloud. So I would say in this sense, like with networking, you're always going to have some footprint of devices and locations that are on premises that are near users and devices. And now that things have been cloudified, that cloud management is happening, or the end-to-end sort of management suites are moving to the cloud, you have to start asking this question: is all cloud all the time the best solution? And so it creates, so it sort of pushes us back to this sort of technology conversation about edge compute, which is that all cloud all the time is not the right solution. And so we need to start moving some things back on-prem if they did move to the cloud, or keeping that footprint and those assets that we have on-prem to start balancing some of that workload for us. So we're moving some compute to the edge and some to the cloud, and finding sort of a mixture of both of those worlds.
And that's called edge compute?
Edge compute, yep. Yep.
Edge compute, nice.
And what's funny about that term too is that like the edge is different to every, from every perspective. Is that like to a campus enterprise, the edge is their LAN, where they have switches and routers and, APs and stuff. But to, a large telco or mobile operator, the edge might be some kind of point of presence where they have, distributed stuff regionally. And so, the edge is, it's a little bit vague, but but that's the cool thing about this conversation, is just how do you balance workloads from on-premise to other points of presence and to the cloud, and create sort of this harmonious whole from each part.
Yeah, that's for sure interesting. It feels like we're going down a path here, right? So there's this, we have all this data that's coming from inside the company. How much data?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how much data do you send? Because, you could send all of it, right? A crazy example is to say, oh, we'll just send all the data to the cloud. Well, you can't. I mean, I'll make a prediction in time that during my lifetime, we're not going to have WAN speeds that equal all the LAN traffic that exists inside a normal company. So we can't send all the data. So there has to be some kind of decisions made. That's a theme of a lot of videos that we've done, that where I've learned, Marcus, is there's a lot of decisions to be made to differentiate how companies do things. And this feels like another one.
Yeah, I mean, even when you were talking earlier about machine learning, it made me think about sort of the data pipeline, which you just described, which is kind of the end-to-end process of data management. And so, that's ultimately where we want to go towards machine learning and AI. But I think there's a lot that people sort of skip over in that data processing that you just were talking about. So we'll pick that up following on in next video. So hope everyone learned a lot. Thanks a lot. And GT, it's always fun.
Yeah, it is. And I did definitely learn a lot. Hope everyone else did too. Thanks, Marcus.
Sweet. Thanks. See y'all.
Later, everyone.